Good morning and welcome to Northern Light Spiritual Center. Northern Light Spiritual Center is a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. Very good. And Northern Light Spiritual Center offers practical and spiritual tools to make positive changes where in our lives. Our promise to reveal, inspire, uplift, celebrate, magnify your greatness. Please join me for our opening song, In This Very Room by Ron and Carol Harris. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room. Turn my glasses off. Good morning. Good morning. For meditation this morning, we're going to have a video, and you're invited to watch the pictures on the screen, or you can just close your eyes and be with the music. So just invite us now to just relax as much as you can, and take a nice couple deep breaths, the breaths that come in and fill your body, because that breath feeds each and every cell in your body. So let's take a deep breath in, and hold it, and release. And another deep breath in. And release. And so here, we're going to start the video.
Get ready, my soul. I'm driving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm driving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. Everything I've ever done, everything I've ever seen, everything I've lost or won, everything I've ever dreamed has brought me here to the present moment. so clearly now. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm driving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. 'Cause here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, close, close, closer to my sacred source. Here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred source. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of love. Get ready, my soul. Get ready, my soul.
So now is the time for our declaration. So I'm going to invite you to join me with it. I'm going to say it one time, but you're welcome to chime in if you feel familiar enough with it. We are an expanding and loving community, working in a field of infinite potential. Two more times. We are an expanding and loving community, working in a field of infinite potential. And finally, we are an expanding and loving community, working in a field of infinite potential. And so it is.
Well, this morning I have two short readings. The first one is according to an old Hindu legend. There was once a time when all human beings were gods, but they so abused their divinity that Brahma, the chief god, decided to take it away from them and hide it where it could never be found. Where to hide their divinity was the question, so Brahma called the council of the gods to help him decide. Let's bury it deep in the earth, said the gods. But Brahma answered, no, that will not do, because humans will dig into the earth and find it. Then the gods said, well, let's sink it in the deepest ocean. Brahma said, no, not there, for they will learn to dive into the ocean and they will find it. Then the gods said, well, let's take it to the top of the highest mountain and hide it there. Once again, Brahma replied, no, that will not do either, because they will eventually climb every mountain, and once again they will take up their divinity. Then the gods gave up and said, "We do not know where to hide it, because it seems that there is no place on earth or in sea that the human beings will not eventually reach." Brahma thought for a long time and said, here is what we will do. We will hide our divinity deep in the center of their own being, for humans will never think to look for it there. All the gods agreed that this was the perfect hiding place, and the deed was done. And since that time, humans have been going up and down the earth, digging, diving, climbing, and exploring, searching for something already within them. And the second part of my reading is in honor of February being the month of love or whatever, which should be every month of the year, every day of the year, but we seem to have to pick one month. This is a poem by Emmett Fox. It's called Love. There is no difficulty that enough love will not conquer, no disease that enough love will not heal, no door that enough love will not open, no gulf that enough love will not bridge, no wall that enough love will not throw down, no sin that enough love will not redeem. It makes no difference how deeply seated may be the trouble, how hopeless the outlook, how muddled the tangle, how great the mistake. The sufficient realization of love will dissolve it all. If only you could love enough, you would be the happiest and most powerful being in the world. And so it is.
So this is this month's chant. Curious, I seek under my surface. Curious, I look inside me. Curious, I show my purpose. Curious, arrives wonderful me. What are my gifts for giving? How to share them in this time and space? Why do I hold back from living? To whom do I dare show my grace? Where does life live in me? Where does life live in me? Curious, I seek under my surface. Curious, I look inside me. Curious, I show my purpose. Curious, arrives wonderful me. What are my gifts for giving? How to share them in this time and space? Why do I hold back from living? To whom do I dare show my grace? Where does life live in me? Where does life live in me? Now it's you. Curious, you seek under your surface. Curious, you look inside you. Curious, you show your purpose. Curious, arrives wonderful you. What are your gifts for giving? How to share them in this time and space? Why do you hold back from living? To whom do you dare show your grace? Where does life live in you? Where does life live in you? Now it's we. Curious, we seek under our surface. Curious, we look inside us. Curious, we show our purpose. Curious, arrives wonderful us. What are our gifts for giving? How to How share them in this time and space? Why do we hold back from living? To whom do we dare show our grace? Where does life live in us? Where does life live in us? Now it's back to me. I really feel it this time if you want. Curious, I seek under my surface. Curious, I look inside me. Curious, I show my purpose. Curious, arrive wonderful me. What are my gifts for giving? I'll share them in this time and space. To whom do I hold back from living? To whom do I dare show my grace? Where does life live in me? Where does life live in me?
If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, You feel defeated, falling on your knees and looking up for some hope tonight. You try to stand up, but you throw your hands up, like you no longer have the strength to fight. 'Cause you've seen too many sunsets, too many days ending in the darkest night. But on your own, you'll never know, never know. If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, Believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water. If you believe. They say that all you need is faith, but it's almost like you lost your way. You took a few wrong turns, took a few breaks, falling behind now looking for grace. 'Cause you need someone to lift you up, yeah, make right all the things you've done. 'Cause on your own you'll never know, never know. If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, Believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water. If you believe, if you believe it, you can do anything, you can do anything, you can do anything if you believe. If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, Believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water. If you believe, yeah.
So, in this month, as we are exploring the superpower of curiosity, I wanted to set the context of believing in ourselves. Michael told that Hindu story about the divinity within us. And at some point, and doesn't it still happen, don't we mess up with our divinity? We stop treating everyone with the grace, with the beauty, with the truth, with the wisdom that fills each other. And so Brahma said, wait a second, we've got to stop this. one of the big things that I'm going to come back to, but I think it's important to say it now, that there are some parts in our society. Has anybody ever heard the word patriarchy? Mm-hmm. Has anyone ever heard the word male chauvinist pig? Has anyone ever heard sexist? Has anyone not heard the word white supremacist? There are all kinds of people who set themselves up above others. There are laws being enacted today. Michael and I increased our pledge to human rights campaign because there are just more and more states that are outlawing elements of being a queer person. And we know that there's a city in Mississippi which is taking away the right of its black citizens to vote. They're recreating a kind of South African setting where the small white minority is going to be establishing what happens. So when this story, this ancient Hindu story arises, it's like, what does that have to do with me? It has to do with us every single day. Today's talk is about the superpower of asking the toughest questions. When we see stuff like this happen, we can either sit back and say, oh, look at that. That's troubling. Or we can see if there's something called in us. So in today's talk, I'm going to be looking at 3 broad elements related to the toughest questions. First question, why am I here? Has anyone ever not asked that question? And it may be simply, why am I here in this place where my car is and I don't want to be here? It may be a deeper sense of, why am I here in my life? Why am I here in this place? But why am I here? The second question is, how do I find out? How do I find my purpose? How do I find why I'm here? How do I do it? And then the last question I want to look at is, when we hit obstacles, how do we counter them? How do we respond to the obstacles that stand in the way of us knowing who we are, that stand in the way of living our purpose? How do we counter our obstacles? So that gives you a map for where we're going today. First thing, in the science of mind teaching, Ernest Holmes suggested there is a greater mind within each which may be called upon. There is nothing too small or too great for this mind. Listen, be receptive, believe absolutely, be convinced. The one with a great purpose in life is always consciously and unconsciously holding this purpose up to the universal influx, and thus creating an outpouring of divine wisdom through their own individual mind. We can connect into something that is wiser than our deepest, farthest imaginations. When the Brahma and the gods were talking about where to put divinity, because it had gotten taken advantage of, it had gotten taken for granted. And in the song, if you believe, the fact is that if you hide it in the deepest ocean, we will get there. Because our imaginations can take us to the deepest oceans. If we set it on the highest mountain, we can climb that. Now, I'm not saying everybody is going to be putting on their boots and heading up Mount Everest. And even locally, most people probably haven't said, I'm going to climb Mount Rainier today. But it's not impossible. It's something that can be done. And we can look at it and we can see that it's this towering, magnificent landscape in our worlds. But it isn't an impossible climb. People used to look to the moon and say, we'll never get there. But we've done it. The power of belief lets us move. Lets us move mountains. Lets us walk on water. There's a story from Christian teachings where Jesus is in a boat and there's this big storm and Jesus is asleep and the apostles are all like, ah! They're all freaked out. And Jesus wakes up and he just walks on the water. And one of the people, Peter, is like, how did you do that? And he's like, you can do it. You can do it too. And he did, but he got a little bit scared, so he started sinking in the water. How many times do we find ourselves getting a little bit scared, and no matter how much belief we had, we start to sink? One of the things that Ernest Holmes characterized about this character, Jesus, is that Jesus was a great example rather than a great exception. And in that story, Peter doesn't stay sunk in the water. Peter gets up and crosses the water. What water have we crossed? What seemingly impossible thing can we take a moment and consider, I did that? I know that you've done the walking on fire. I know that you've done the bending the spoons. These seemingly impossible things, you embrace them and said, wait a second, somebody else can do them. I can do it too. I know that Stephanie's mom had her kidney disease come to a point where that would mean the end of her life. And Stephanie donated a kidney. I believe Phyllis did the same for one of your siblings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, 100 years ago, if you had diabetes, the outcome was the treatment of starvation. Very effective. You'll be fine as long as you don't eat anything. But the problem with not eating anything is then you starve. And while you're not dying of your diabetes, you're dying of something else. The outcome for me with my diabetes is very different than what it was for my grandfather. And with my diabetes, one of the side effects is that I have this, I no longer have the nervous system telling me, hey, dude, your glucose is low. And when people's glucose is low, has anybody ever been really hungry and you just don't think very well? Well, multiply that if you have a hormone that you've injected into yourself that sucks away all your glucose so that your brain is like, nope, I'm not on. For me, it's a little bit like being trapped behind a glass. And I've got people talking to me saying, hello, sir, are you there? And I'm like, cannot say a word. And yet, there is all of this research and these questions that people asked about, can't we do something different? And we can. There are possibilities that didn't exist. the question, why am I here? A lot of times the reason that we get stuck is that we stick with it in our head, we stick with it in our mind, we stick with it there, and we don't let it deepen into our hearts, into our souls. We intellectualize it, and then we can debate it. Well, am I here for that, or am I here for that, or am I here for that, or am I here for that? Has anyone ever gotten trapped in that place? I think I know what it is. But then you spend all of this time debating and questioning that question. What happens when you take that question, why am I here, to my heart? What happens when we take that question to my soul? Why am I here? And the heart and the soul may not have the words, may not give us the pat answers that we might find in a Hallmark card or an American Greeting. I don't want to be pushing one particular brand. In 1964, in a book entitled Freedom from Stress, 1964, Freedom from Stress, Holmes wrote, "It seems that humans exist for the purpose of self-expression. There appears to be no other reason or excuse for being. The infinite has already implanted within humans an instinctive intuition, which is the spiritual knowledge of good, and their whole growth results from an inner awakening." Why am I here is a tough question for that inner awakening. Why am I here is not a one-time question. It's a daily question. It's a daily source of curiosity. So I'm going to move to the second question. How do I find my purpose? Okay, why am I here? And then what's my purpose? How do I find it? No other human being can ever ignite life the way each of us can. There is something that we have to give and to share that is. One of my colleagues this week got on our discussion board and said, I want to bring back a tradition of celebrating other people. And then she brought forward one of the people who just generously said, I will do that work for you. It's not easy for my schedule, and I will do it. They weren't looking for praise. They weren't looking for being celebrated, but the other person who had that happen felt so grateful. And they lifted up this colleague, our friend Katie, and said, look at this, look at the generosity. Katie was in a position that Katie could share this generosity. How many times do we find ourselves being able to share and we aren't feeling like it's a huge weight on our shoulder? In the Christian tradition, it's not a huge cross that we're bearing. It's not a huge burden. It isn't a major obstacle. Years ago, when I started graduate school to become a school psychologist and to get my master's degree, one of my courses was around identifying and understanding the self. And one of the most powerful stories or books that we read was written by this Czech psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And I was very proud that I could eventually learn to say that name because there were many more letters than sounds in Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. What Mihai Csikszentmihalyi did was he worked with teens, and he had them journaling about their lives. What am I going to get from journaling teens? What he found was a condition called the flow experience. That they kept track about what they were doing. And they monitored their sense of time. They monitored their sense of enjoyment. They monitored their sense of being alive and being in the world. And what he found unilaterally among all of the people that he researched was that there were times in their lives when each of them uniquely found what they loved doing, and in those moments, time disappeared. He characterized it as the flow experience. And I dare say that if we stop for a moment, we will find what our flow experiences are. Where we stop looking at our watches, where we stop thinking, when will this end? But we're just so absorbed by what it is that we're doing that we are one with that activity. We are one with that thought. We are one with that experience. Spiritually, the counterpoint to the flow experience in psychology is called the numinous. It's being one with all that is. I know Michael has talked about that when he had a meditation experience while visiting Egypt. And the experience isn't necessarily what you expect. And an obstacle that can arise with that experience is that we have it, and then it's like, how do I get it again? And I'm going to make the exact same situation, and then we're like, it's not working. That's not really my purpose because it's not working. The problem is that we're so stuck on that past experience that we're not open to the way that it can expand and express in a new way. So how do we experience our purpose? We allow ourselves to engage. We allow ourselves to pursue what it is that we love. So again, with that opening song, if you believe, if you're pursuing something that seems impossible and you find yourself doing it, that's part of your purpose. Consider the impossible things that you do. And I raise this just as a way to consider, not as an idol. The Hebrew people were one of the first people that identified the notion of one experience of the divine rather than multiple experiences of the divine, rather than multiple gods that are competing for each other. That there's a unity, that there's a oneness. And not to put other idols before it. Sometimes we build up experiences and we create these idols. So a tough question is, have I turned this into an idol in pursuing my passion? Deepak Chopra said, everyone has a purpose in life, a unique gift or special talent to give to others. And when we blend this unique talent with service to others, we experience the ecstasy and exaltation of our own spirit. That's a little bit what Katie did for that other friend. So I'm going to come to the last question. How do we overcome the obstacles? And I'm going to merge the how do we overcome the obstacles with the fact that this month is Black History Month, Black Lives Matter time. Now, I puzzled about this. Why is it that this happens in February, the shortest month of the year? Is this some kind of white thing to minimize? And it wasn't. It was created by Carter G. Woodson. And he established Negro history during the second week in 1926. And he established it between Abraham Lincoln's birthday on February 12th and Frederick Douglass's birthday on February 14th. So it started as a week. It started as a week to call out and celebrate and magnify and express thanks for all of the things that African Americans were doing and had done across the country. So it wasn't a minimization saying, oh, February is the shortest month, we can do it there. It was something that they wanted to market. And then in 1969, they said, wait a second, it shouldn't be just a week. It should be a month. So in 1970, they declared it as a month. John Lewis advised, do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. Nearly 179 years ago, Reverend Henry Highland Garnet identified resistance as the only path to freedom, justice, and equality, self-determination, social transformation. In thunder tones, Garnet shouted, let your motto be resistance. Resistance, resistance. So the how do we encounter? We resist. Now this goes a little bit counter. A lot of people have said, Ernest Holmes said, only be for things. Don't be against things. But resist what is wrong. If you just stand by and say, oh, it's there, but I'm not going to focus on that. But if you ignore it, that also doesn't make it go away. I'd like you to take a moment and consider a time that you experienced some kind of oppression. The notion of resistance is that oppression does not act like a tidal wave over you. Resistance lets you stand up in the face of those obstacles, in the face. And I'm saying resistance because that's this year's Black History Month theme. It's about resistance. So I'm going to quote this. By resisting, Black people have achieved triumphs, successes, and progress of ending chattel slavery, dismantling Jim and Jane Crow segregation in the South, increasing political representation at all government levels, desegregating educational institutions, passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964, opening the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History in D.C., and increasing diverse representation of Black experiences in media. Black resistance strategies have served as a model for every other social movement in the country. Thus, their legacy and importance cannot be understated. As societal and political forces escalate to limit access to and exercise of the ballot, eliminate the teaching of Black history, the work to push back into the 1890s, we can only rely on our capacity to resist. The enactment of H.R. 40, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the Breathe Act, and the closure of the racial wealth gap is not the end. They too will require us to mobilize our resources, human and material, and fight for freedom, justice, and equality, self-determination, and or social transformation. How do we resist? We find where it is that we're triggered and we stand up. I've talked before. We can call someone out or we can call someone in. Both are powerful places to stand in resistance. Calling out may be in a setting where we publicly say, stop that. That is a hurtful thing to say. That is a hurtful thing to do. That is offensive. It's standing up. Calling in may be in a more private, intimate conversation. And the choice between calling out or calling in is one that we make at a deeply personal level. I know from the experience, when I called out a certain supervisor, it never failed to backfire. Because the supervisor just was completely ruffled and unable to hear anything. So every good idea that I said was broken apart because of the way it got delivered. But by calling in, by asking, can I meet with you? Can I meet with you and talk with you about this? There was a receptivity that wasn't there before. So the process of resisting, the process of calling out or calling in, sometimes we're going to find that making a public statement is the powerful way to act. Sometimes when we know our audience, we may realize that calling them in that more personal level may actually be more powerful. Because rather than them becoming so ruffled that nothing that we say can even get close to them, but in that context of that greater intimacy, it can get through. Take a moment. Can you ever consider a time that you might have called someone out, and rather than achieving your end of getting heard and having something taken care of, it blew up? Anybody ever have that?
All the time with my teenager.
Okay. By contrast, when you call in, that there may be, by leaning into that emotional connection, by leaning into the heart, there's a capacity that what that hard thing is that we have to say can be heard and can be received. That the seed that gets planted rather than the seed just gets washed away. So again, today's talk title is Ask the Toughest Questions. With the notion of who am I, we can direct our question not just to our head, but to our hearts and our souls. To ask, how do I find what my purpose is? That we find the spark. That we find the light that makes time go away. And finally, to realize that how do we overcome it? We resist. We resist the obstacles that arise, and we navigate the way that we resist. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a one-size-fits-most. Because as we integrate these things, we can find that how we resist is going to be impacted by who we find ourselves being. how we resist is integrated by the purpose that's lighting us up. It may be that we find the person who's causing harm, we find out what really lights them up, and we join with them around what lights them up. So I have an affirmation that I invite you to join me with. It's pretty simple. It's a question. What does the divine within me call from me now? So let's do it. What does the divine within me call from me now? What does the divine within me call from me now? And one last time. What does the divine within me call from me now? And I'd like to conclude this talk with a lift every voice and sing. Raise every voice and sing. So this is considered the National Black Anthem. It is going to be sung today at the Super Bowl by Cheryl Lee Ray. And I just wanted to ground the experience of Black History Month with this song.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea.
I like this part right here. Come on.
Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Maybe add a little something to it. Just to encourage you. And we'll take it to church later. Let's go!
We'll keep marching right till the victory is won.
To all my brothers out there.
Hold your head up, brother, till the victory is won.
To all my sisters in the struggle.
Keep believing, sister, till the victory is won.
Till that day. Hey!
Let us march on
Correct.
till victory is won.
And so it is. I thank Reverend Vaughan for the inspiring talk about asking that question, which I know we've all probably asked 1,000 times in our lives is, why am I here? Whether it's, like you said, here on this earth, in this body, and or in this room, that question is probably asked subconsciously or consciously every day. I know I think about it a lot, trying to figure out. And sometimes we just can't figure it out. We just lean into it, and it'll be shown to us. I mean, that is life. Life is shown to us each and every day. And I like the part where you said that we're here for self-expression.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is so true. And that's why the divine is here, to express through us as us. And if we think about that, who are we? We are the divine expressing. That's it. I mean, that's who we are. And that flow experience, that is so true. When you find something that you really, really love, or you just put your whole being, your physical, mental, emotional, and everything into it, and it's actually glorious. To experience that time when you're doing something that is so blissful, find that time, find that space, find that bliss that is you. And so next Sunday, Reverend Pamela will be speaking. And then the following Sunday will be our final Sunday in this space. And I'm asking, for anyone who's been part of this experience here at Northern Lights, here on 14th Avenue, to come and to bless this place out. I know I'm still holding on to a little bit of angst, anger, whatever, because we have to leave. But it is the experience of moving out and moving on to something new, something greater, something better. So that's why I'm inviting people to bless this space, because it has served us well. And it's hard to let things go. It's hard to say goodbye. But sometimes, by blessing and being grateful, that makes it a lot easier. And so I want to thank everyone who's been here today, whether out in the ethers or in the room. For you are part of the experience. Your love, your support, your presence is a part of the experience of Northern Lights Spiritual Center and of life. And so as we move out from this space today, let us take this experience of bliss and joy and our purpose out into the world and share it. And resist. I've resisted a lot of things in my life. I always thought I was I don't want to say a troublemaker, but but there are many times that I have resisted and I've said something about it, and there's other times I haven't. So the best thing is to stand up and resist. And with that, if there's anyone contributions you can send in through Northern Lights Spiritual Center. There's a donate button. And we are going to the next 3 weeks. I think Reverend Vaughan's going to lead this. I'm going to nominate him to lead this. You're welcome. But it's one of his gifts. And I can recognize that. He's going to lead us in a round, what's called a round robin of prayer. And he will explain it for those that, because I get tongue-tied, and that's where he's much better at it than I am. So,
Okay. So a round robin of prayer is basically that we're just praying all together. And we're speaking our words out loud into the space together.
oh, they can unmute too.
And you can all please unmute so that this is a chance where we are praying about finding a place, that we're praying about that the business that comes here is successful, because there's nothing like leaving behind a little black rain cloud of we wish you despair and nothing good happens. But it's that's saying that everything that we have built in this space, that we know it lifts it up. And that we launch from that place of that this has been a beautiful place for us to be. And that something even more beautiful is awaiting us. And like one of the things in the science of my teaching is that what we are seeking is seeking us. That if we have a call, a felt call for something, that call is calling to us because we're feeling it. It's almost like a magnetic pull. So in a shared prayer that we are praying together about this space. So I will just launch us into, I acknowledge that we are seeking a place and that place is seeking us. Come on, you can join me with this. So, and that as we are seeking this, that this seeking is sharing, it is calling, it is pulling, it is advancing, it is moving, it is expressing, and there is more and more good that is going to be expressed. And that Northern Light Spiritual Center has been a place of wisdom, it has been a place of grace, it has been a vision, it has been a movement, it has been a connection, it has been light and love, it has been a means through which more and more good can express. And this good expressing is a blessing. This good expressing is a blessing. And I give thanks for this blessing. And I know that this blessing is forming itself in time and in space, not simply in mind, but in outcome and practice. And I celebrate the beauty of the space that Northern Lights occupies. I delight in going to this new place. I celebrate it. I magnify it. I lift it up, and in the lifting up, I know that more and more good comes into being. And the Northern Lights touches ways that it's never been able to do before because of the limitations of this space and because of the freedom that comes to us in this new space. And I celebrate this freedom. I delight in this freedom. I magnify this freedom. I celebrate it. I know that it is good and very good. And I say, Amen. Hashem. And so it is.
Thank you.
And so it is. Amen.
So thank you all for doing that. And now we get to shift gears.